Welcome to this edition of Joy in Our Town. I'm Ann Farrell Tata, and today I'm delighted to welcome two very important guests from CASA of Virginia Beach. We have Season Roberts and LaShonda Carson, and our youth is our issue, and court-appointed advocates is our topic. Thank you both, not only for the work that you guys do, because it's so important, but also for being here today to share a little bit more about it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Season, I'm going to start with you,
Okay.
and can you tell our viewers what is CASA and sort of the history behind it?
Sure. CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates. In our office, we recruit, train, and support volunteers to advocate for child victims of abuse and neglect. The program started back in the late 1970s with a judge in Seattle, Washington. He was frustrated with the number of child abuse and neglect cases coming before his court, and nobody could really tell him what was going on with the kids. The social workers may have had 30 cases that they were trying to service, and they couldn't see the kids like he wanted them to. So he got a group of his friends together and said, you know what, go out and find out about these kids. Let me know who they're staying with, what services they need, and what's the best possible placement for them going forward. And hence the CASA program was born. It became a best practice in the legal field, and then there are 900 CASA programs in the United States right now today.
That's amazing.
It is
so you're in
amazing.
all 50 states?
Yes.
Now, do you guys work with the social workers? Is that who you, and what department do you, who oversees you?
Right, so in the state of Virginia, there are 27 CASA programs, and we're overseen by the Department of Criminal Justice Services, or DCJS for short.
Okay.
CASA is written into the Code of Virginia, and so because we're written into the code, there needs to be a regulatory agency that oversees our activities. And so DCJS gives us a guideline about how we're supposed to operate, but each program is unique and individual. For instance, Virginia Beach CASA, we're a private nonprofit organization, but there are some CASA programs who are run by the city municipalities, or they're a part of an umbrella organization. And so working with DCJS, they give us a guideline of what we're supposed to do. They tell us the 5 duties of a CASA volunteer, and from there we build upon our program from that.
All right, so let's talk about the actual volunteers. They're court-appointed advocates, right?
Correct.
And what is that, and what is their responsibility?
So when a child abuse and neglect case comes before the juvenile court here in Virginia Beach, I'll use that because that's where we're from, the judge will look at the case and say, you know what, there's a lot going on with this case. We're not quite sure where all the family members are. These children are very vulnerable. I need a CASA volunteer on this case. And so the judge will appoint a CASA volunteer. And we get our court order, and that court order allows us to go and check on the child's medical records, their school records. We visit the child in their home. If they're in foster care, we'll visit the child in foster care. We interview everybody in the family, just really trying to figure out the child has been abused, but going forward, what's the best possible placement for them? So our goal, our ultimate goal, is a safe, permanent home for these children.
Now, when you go to interview, do you go to their home?
Yes.
Now, or do you have someone, are you safe doing that? If it's, no, I mean, if it's a hostile abuse situation, I would think that could be dangerous.
Yeah, for the most part, I feel like we are safe going to the home. Most of our kids are in foster care, so their foster care parents are through the Department of Human Services. But we don't send our CASA volunteers anywhere where they don't feel safe. And so if you're not feeling safe going to the home, the child might not be safe either. And so if you're not comfortable going to the home, we'll meet the parents, you know, at a public place. We'll see the kids in their environment, like school or something. You want to add something to that?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. It's a question that we get from our volunteers that are applying to be in the program and want to know a little bit more about us. When we first get a case, we are in communication with the social workers who have often had prior communication with the family to sort of assess how safe it is to go out and see any of the individuals, to go to their homes. As Season was saying, well, we could meet them in other places that might provide more safety net, sometimes in the courthouse, sometimes meeting with them in the presence of their attorney, and sometimes just scheduling a place just out in the community that we can meet with the volunteers.
So, and you guys, are you meeting with the parent and the child? You're meeting with both, not just, are you ever just talking to the child to try to find out, you know, what's going on?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Our goal is to make sure that their needs aren't falling through the cracks during the court proceedings.
Yeah.
So we meet with everyone involved in the child's life, and we're also in communication with the parents, even if the children aren't placed with them. So they could be in foster care, and we'll see them at their home or school or daycare. Or they could be placed with their biological parents who maybe there's a protective order in order to protect them and keep them safe in their own homes, and we'll see them there.
And is it, I don't know if you can answer this, but is it, you know, one parent or both parents? Like usually if they're in this situation, is it because both parents are involved, or maybe one parent can't protect them how does that work?
It's a little bit of both. We see cases where, maybe the mother is the abuser and the kids are safe with the father, so then they'll safety plan that. Or we'll see where there are cases where both parents have abused these children, or there's some allegations from both parents, and so
Right.
we're investigating everybody. So even if it's just the mom that has the charge, or maybe the mom and the dad, we're looking at everybody. We're talking to everybody to make sure we can give the judge a clear picture of the people that's involved in this child's life.
Now, I mean, this is really interesting because you have to find, like, what do you look for in a volunteer? I would think you'd have to have somebody that is pretty savvy, not very gullible. You know what I mean? 'Cause
Yes.
You can be tricked.
Yeah.
What do you look for in a volunteer?
So our volunteers come from all walks of life. So we have stay-at-home moms, we have business people, we have attorneys, we have doctors, we have students who are in college. What we're looking for is someone who cares about kids. That's the first thing. And someone who's willing to speak up for a child where they wouldn't have a voice otherwise in the courtroom. We take them through a 5-week training process. There's half online and half in the classroom. And you're learning about the child welfare system, you're learning about the judicial system. We have a judge come in and talk to the trainees. We have a GAL, which is a guardian ad litem, which is the attorney for the child. They'll come in and talk to the trainees. But we're looking for somebody who will be willing to stick with that child through the entire process. We're also very careful. We do about 7 different background checks on our volunteers.
I would hope
yes.
so. Last thing they need is more trauma.
Exactly. So we're very careful about that. And in the end, I think we have the elite of the elite when it comes to CASA volunteers.
We have
What-
some of the most.
No, go ahead. You have
We
some of
have
the most.
Some of the most amazing volunteers within our program that are committed to seeing their children.
Yeah.
They build such a good rapport and good relationship with them. They've known what they've gone through. They know their
Yeah.
family history. They tend to be committed to the family and knowing, just sort of having a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the case. They see the kids weekly. They know their teachers. They know their medications. They know their diagnoses. They know who their best friends are in school. They really get to
get
know.
invested.
Yeah, the personalities of all of the kids.
So
they know
what is sort of the lifespan of a volunteer with a family or child?
So typically, a case should last, 18 months, and so that's what the courts say. That's what the courts say. But that ranges. Some cases last a month. We get assigned, and the parents do what they're supposed to do, or the judge says, this didn't rise to the level of abuse, and we're going to let them go. Or some cases we've been on for 3 years, just because there's just not the right placement for that child going forward.
No, and as far as family members, like if there are siblings involved, does the advocate take care of the siblings, or is there one per child?
No, so if we're assigned to a family group could be one child, or we even had a family group that was 11 kids.
Wow.
Yes, and
I
so
would hope you'd have more than one volunteer.
well, with that particular case, we had a very innovative volunteer. He was a retired gentleman who wanted to take that entire case on his own, and he did it. But we've had other cases where we've had 8 to 10 kids, and we split them up between advocates. And those volunteers work together to make sure they're all communicating. So we submit one report to the court about what's going on with those kids.
Are the children receptive to this? I mean, I'm sure they've been traumatized, so are they receptive to another adult stranger that's coming into their lives?
The good thing about CASA is, and we hear it all the time from our kids once we're coming off the case, is that when they come into the system, there's so many adults involved in their life, and they see these people going in and out, but CASA's there every week. So we're there building that rapport with those children or that child every week. And I remember one case we talked about where this kid had been kind of bounced around from foster home to foster home, and he was just so anxious about everything, and his CASA volunteer showed up, and he said, I knew you would find me. I knew you would find me. And so, our kids do build a rapport with our CASA volunteers, and sometimes it's hard to let go, like once that case closes.
That's the other thing I was wondering.
Yeah.
I'm sure that, do they tend to stay in touch, or are they allowed or encouraged to stay in touch after they get into a safe place?
This is a bit of a tricky situation. We try to encourage our volunteers that once the child has achieved permanency, not let them go, but just let them be permanent in that home. And so the CASA being there just kind of reminds them of the situation that they went through. And the CASA needs to help that child transition so they can get used to their family and going forward and having a productive life. And so one CASA explained it very well. She said, you know what? I had to help you cross this bridge. I had to help you get over this bridge. and you got across the bridge and you're safe, and now I have to go back and get another child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is a nice way to
Yeah.
say it. Do any of the kids grow up to become volunteers?
Yes.
That's got to
Absolutely.
really touch
Yeah,
your heart
it
when
does.
that happens.
Yeah, it
All right,
does.
what about some of the rules and regulations and laws that, about children's advocacy? Because I would think that that is something that's always changing too.
Right. We just a little bit about the 5 duties of a CASA volunteer, and if you look into the Code of Virginia, it's in there. So we have to investigate the case that we've been assigned. We have to submit a written court report to the court, to the judge, about the things that we're finding out about. We have to make sure that the judge's orders are being monitored. So the judge will order certain things to be done, and CASA will check on those things. Like if the parents need parenting classes, if the kids need to go to the dentist, the judge can order all that, and we make sure it's happening.
So do you advise them on that? Are you in touch with the judges and say, we think that they need this, this, and this, and then they make it happen? So that's got to really be nice that you have that behind you.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of the work that we do works up to this court report. We're in touch with our volunteers on a weekly basis. Multiple times a week, we go with them on their first visits,
Yeah.
help them sort of process the information that we're receiving. Some, again, are psychologists, doctors, and attorneys
Yeah.
that know the information, but we work really closely in order to form a good report with a lot of really good recommendations. And because they have the time as volunteers to be in contact with all of the facilities that the children may have are going to,
Yeah.
the parents, their service providers, we get a lot of detailed information that the court wouldn't otherwise have.
Wow. All right, so let's talk to a viewer who's watching, sitting at home and thinking, wow, this is something I feel really passionate about. I'd like to do it. I know you said 5-week training, but you've sort of talked about what you're looking for, but let's say that's the right person,
Right.
they've done the background checks, they sign up for a class, and then what happens?
So once we do the interview process and the background checks, and you go through that 5-week training process, you're sworn in actually by a juvenile court judge. We actually have a formal swearing-in ceremony, and the judge comes and talks about the expectations of the court. And once you're sworn in, we will assign you a case as soon as one is available.
Wow, so are you by yourself doing that?
By yourself doing the case?
Yeah.
So we have a volunteer or advocate manager that helps each volunteer. So
So there's a staff person,
There's a
so
staff
you're working
person.
with a staff person, and that's what you do?
Yes.
Someone,
yes.
okay, yeah.
Once they're appointed, we've known a little bit about them through the training and application process.
Yeah.
So we're able to tailor cases or tailor our calls to certain
Yeah.
volunteers that have strengths that would work best for certain cases.
Oh,
So
wow.
knowing that about them, knowing sort of the background of the cases, we're able to more effectively supervise and assist the volunteers.
So they're once they get through this, they're pretty ready to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that when you say 5 weeks, is it? I don't know if did you say how many? Is that 2 days a week, or how does that
So
work? And
the
is it during the day or at night?
Yeah, so you have
For the working people that are watching.
Exactly.
We got to get everybody covered.
So there's an online training module that everybody participates in,
Oh,
where you
yeah,
have to do assignments online. But we have class one night a week, and so it's usually
Okay.
6 to 9 on a Tuesday or Thursday, just one night a week, depending on how that training class works. And so you come to class, and that's where you interact with your classmates. You learn a little bit about yourself in this process too, because you learn how you'll handle different situations or things you may have dealt with in your past that you've seen that you will deal with in class as well.
And it's a really interactive class.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we bring in people from all over the community because the curriculum, it's a national curriculum. It's evidence-based, so
Yeah.
we really focus on what are the outcomes to having a CASA volunteer
Yeah.
on cases. What are the outcomes for abuse and neglect? We study all of that, excuse me. So we have community leaders come and speak with our volunteers, and as well as city attorneys to talk about the law, as well as the judge. So they're pretty well-rounded and trained by the time they come out, and they get continued education from each of the advocate managers.
And they have these kind of on an ongoing basis. They have these training classes like once a quarter or something.
Yeah, we train 3 times a year.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We're going to continue this conversation. I am Ann Farrell Tata. We've been joined by members of the CASA staff, and stay with us. We'll be right back. Joy in our town. Thank you. Welcome back to this edition of Joy in Our Town. We are going to continue our conversation with Susan Roberts and LaShonda Carson with CASA of Virginia Beach. And our issue is youth, and we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about child abuse and neglect. So thank you guys for staying with us.
Thank you.
And again, I want to say thank you for the work you do, because it's so important. But let's talk, and Susan, I'm going to start with you. What does child abuse look like here in Hampton Roads? Do you have some statistics?
I do. Just a like clarify, we work specifically in Virginia Beach, but we do understand what's going on in our region. So last year, we had about 12,000 referrals for child abuse and neglect that came through the CPS hotline.
In Virginia?
In our region in Hampton Roads.
Just our region?
In Hampton Roads. So of those 12,000 calls, what they will do is the CPS workers will assess them and be like, you know, does this rise to the level of going forward for an investigation, or do we not throw it out, but it just doesn't rise to the level. They have like levels 1, 2, and 3, I believe that is.
So wait, one that doesn't rise to the level, what happens to that?
So some things that we might think is child abuse and neglect does not rise to the level of what the law says. And so
wow.
just because you see somebody spanking their child in public, and
Yeah.
you might think that's abuse and neglect, if you call
The
it
law
into the highlight, it
doesn't.
might not say,
Yeah.
it might not. So
Okay.
you have to, we always err on the side of caution. Like we
Right.
tell our volunteers, they're mandated reporters, and if you think something is abuse and neglect, call it in. It's not for you to decide whether it is or not.
Right.
Right. So of those referrals, 50% of them are accepted. And so they'll look into them, and either the family will need an assessment, like, you know, instead of doing it this way, why don't you do it this way? They'll offer them parenting classes or things like that. And some of them are founded where
Yeah.
that's really an abuse and neglect case. And so after the investigation, sometimes they go to court and sometimes not. So in Virginia Beach last year, we had about 3,000 referrals. And of those, 200, at the end, 200 of them were founded to be actual abuse and neglect cases.
Wow.
And so last year as well, Virginia Beach CASA handled about 181 of those cases. So
Wow. Now, how are those children, or are those, like, how many family units does that represent?
So of the 181 is 181 children, but there are 47 family groups that we took care of.
All right, what is the difference between abuse and neglect? Because they're kind of different things, right?
That's an interesting question. Abuse and neglect is sort of encompassing. Neglect is a form of child abuse. So for the state of Virginia, anyone that could be considered abuse and neglect case would be a minor that was abused and neglected by a caretaker. You'd have to be in a caretaker role. And it's anyone that causes or threatens harm physically or mentally. Anyone that fails to provide adequate supervision, adequate shelter, food, resources to live.
Yeah.
Anyone who's abandoned a child, and anyone who, let me just look at my notes here,
Yeah.
has committed any illegal sexual act or substance, expose the children to like a controlled substance. So it's all encompassing. What we tend to see most of is neglect cases for various reasons: lack of resources,
Right.
lack of
They
education.
go to work and they
Absolutely.
can't afford a babysitter. You hear about those.
Absolutely.
Isolation. There's a lot of families
Oh.
that don't have support. If you think
Oh,
about when
yeah.
you've had a child and all the people, all the friends and family that's come and help and
Right.
support, or when you were growing up, all the people that were around helping and support you. If somebody is isolated here for whatever reason, that can be very difficult to find that kind of support. So that
Yeah.
we do see that a lot too, as well as mental health.
Oh gosh,
As a big
yes.
issue.
Yeah. So who, like, are these neighbors that are calling, or family members, or the children themselves? Who
All of the
call?
above.
Who
Yes.
reports? Really?
All of the above. We really try to spread awareness about child abuse and neglect so that anyone feels comfortable
Yeah.
calling, whether it's a friend, whether it's a relative, anyone that understands what the parameters of and the ramifications of child abuse and neglect can call and feel empowered to do so. So we really encourage people just to educate themselves
Yeah.
and not be just a bystander seeing it
Right.
happen, but to call it in so that they can be some sort of intervention for the family.
Well, and as child advocate in the court system, you probably wouldn't be the first call, right? So is it a 911 call? Is it Child Protective Services? If somebody was suspecting something, or a teacher, who do they call?
There's the actual.
I started thinking, I thought, I wouldn't even know who to call.
Mhm. There's actually a CPS hotline for each city.
CPS, which is,
Protective
Child Protective
Services.
Services
Oh, okay, okay.
hotline, excuse me, for each,
I know,
for
y'all
each
don't
city.
know the lingo.
Where it's a different language, really, when
Yeah.
we get on this. So we speak in all these acronyms.
Yeah.
But Child Protective Services.
okay, so that's who you would call.
Right, right. The
And-
part of Department of Human Services.
Oh my
So
gosh.
you would
And then
call
they
them.
know where to fan out.
Correct.
Absolutely. And it can be called in at any time of the day. So if it's after 5 o'clock, if it's on a weekend, you can still call a state hotline that will filter it through an after-hours worker within the locality.
Yeah. All right, now as an advocate, you probably know the answer to this, but how do these families go from sort of a stable home to unsafe? Is it a progression? Is it just, like they got bad news and they're just taking it out? What is there sort of a psychology behind how it all happens?
That's pretty loaded as well.
Yeah, I know. I realize that that's
and-
all encompassing.
There's a lot of different reasons that we read about, and statistics contribute to child abuse and neglect. For our program, we're most of the time involved after it's developed to this point. So we more so do sort of background to find out what happened to get them to that point.
Oh, yeah.
Oftentimes there is a cyclical effect of abuse and neglect within the family, lack of education on proper parenting, proper supervision, lack of understanding of child development stages. So we get a lot of abuse and neglect cases based off of a potty accident and the parent overreacted, or just an expectation that a child understand what it means to really lie when they're just, it's a developmental milestone. So oftentimes it's something that's happening over a long period of time, and it's not sudden, but that happens too.
Yeah.
It could be a one-time mistake, that a child or a parent did something that was inappropriate or a mistake, and that Department of Human Services will get involved and educate the family on a proper and more appropriate way of handling themselves moving forward. So it's a little bit of both.
Right.
But you usually will see families that have had something going on that snowballed into a crisis, and that's when we become involved.
Are you finding that the moms or dads, the parents are younger? Are they younger, or is age not a factor?
I don't believe age is a factor. We see it, the whole gambit of age, socioeconomic background, just career people versus non-career people. I don't see it as an age thing. In your work, I don't think you see it as an age thing either, just because.
No, we'll have several cases where there's younger parents, but we also have several cases where there's older parents, grandparents, people that have already adopted children, and they're coming back before the court because they've been abused or neglected by those caretakers. So child abuse and neglect is something that just goes across any expectation of socioeconomic status or demographic.
Well, and so going back to the actual court system, as the advocate, you're working with the Ignitum. What is that?
The Guardian ad
The
litem.
Guardian ad litem. And you're working with the lawyer to help, like if it's a divorce situation, and your whole thing is protecting the child, right? So do you actually go to the court with the child and a lawyer, or what do you?
We do. We go to the court, and sometimes the child might be old enough to be present in the courtroom. Usually it's around the age of 13 or older if it's appropriate. Some hearings are not appropriate for them to be present.
So you are representing them. You are there. You're there in place of them.
We're their
typically.
advocate, but there is an attorney. The guardian ad litem is their attorney that would represent them legally in the court system. But we work with the guardian ad litem very frequently in gathering information, because we're unique in that we have 1 to 2 cases where the social workers and guardian ad litems have several cases, several children.
Focus.
Exactly.
Right. We're able to go and not only say that this child has completed this service, but we can call the evaluator and ask, what are the recommendations? What are the concerns? Well, not only can we say that mother or father did or did not complete a service, or that what they reported, we can call the facilitator and say, were they on time? Do you have any concerns? Were they engaged? Was there anything that you think should be done further? So that we can gather a lot of detailed information that both the social worker and the guardian ad litem would utilize moving forward.
So they really take your recommendations. So they come to you and they say, help us, because with you having, less clients, you can really, you probably know more than they do, because they just don't have time to find out everything.
Correct.
True. We
Do
give
they
them a
ask
lot
you
of
for
information.
advice, and are you allowed to give it?
So at the end of that court report that we have to submit, we have 4 recommendations at the end of that court report.
Okay.
And it's currently where should the child reside, what services the child needs, what does visitation look like for the parents with the child, and then what services do the parents need. And so we do to measure the efficacy of our program, we see how many of our recommendations are accepted, and 95% of them are accepted.
Wow.
Yeah, 95%.
We work really hard as a program to gather as much comprehensive information as possible. Our reports are fact-based, it's not opinion-based. So we put in the recommendations on what we feel would be in the child's best interest. And so the social worker and the guardian ad litem get a lot of facts from us
Yeah.
on a monthly basis.
Do they try to, the parents, do they try to influence you? And, I mean, I would think that, you know.
Well, our goal is to build a good rapport with both the
Yeah.
parents and the children to collect information and to help.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the parents tend to be children that we never got to. They have a
Wow,
tremendous
that's a
amount.
powerful statement, isn't
Yeah,
it?
tremendous amount of trauma in their background
Yeah.
that maybe no one could help and reach and bring them across that bridge.
Yeah.
So now they're here in the situation with their children, and they love their children.
Yeah. You
It's
just don't know how to
Right.
parent them.
Right.
That's heartbreaking.
Yes.
So are you in touch with the other resources that you can say, hey, you might want to do this or that, or, you know, point them in a direction that would help them?
We do. We recommend usually to the social worker, because the social
yeah.
worker's tasked with providing services to the entire family.
Right.
And setting them up and providing the in-between, the mediator between
Yeah.
those things. We're collecting information and giving it to the judge. So we have a slightly different role in that.
Right.
It's less
You're just the
responsibility.
fax man.
Right. We're just the messenger.
Yeah.
So we do try to assist if we know other programs that could be beneficial.
Yeah.
We have the time to look them up. We have the time to
Right.
look up the qualifiers that would assist the child or the parent. So we could recommend that to the social worker or the guardian ad litem. Who will be
Now
in touch with the
you're a little unique in that you're a staff person, but you also volunteer too, right?
Yes, yes.
So, and we only have about 20 seconds left, but tell me, like, what's the most rewarding thing for you? Because you are in a little bit of a unique situation.
The most rewarding thing for me are the outcomes.
Oh,
The outcomes
yeah.
that we have on our cases.
Yeah.
Our children are more likely to be adopted. They spend
Wow.
less time in the foster care system. They receive more services as well as their parents. They don't re-enter the court system half as likely to re-enter the court system as children or adults. So it's fiscally good for the community.
Yeah.
And that turns into long-term effects for their life, long-term positive outcomes
Wow.
for health, for relationships, for their children, and
living
so
life.
on. So it really makes a difference.
Well, thank you guys so much. This was
Thank you.
really interesting. I really appreciate
Thank
y'all
you.
being here. I am Ann Farrell Tata. Thank you so much for watching today, and we will see you next time on Joy in Our Town. Thank you.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town brought to your home every day. So write Joy in Our Town, P.O. Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.